To people who have also worked with multimillionaires or billionaires, what is something different they do from ordinary people? Years ago, a friend of mine's dad was trying to sell his startup company and picked up an investor at the airport. He was proud of his classic Rolls-Royce and noticed the investor looking around, playing with the air vents. So he said, "Is this your first time in a Rolls-Royce?" The guy said no, but it was his first time in the front seat. Flex. I used to do in-person one-on-one market research interviews with luxury car owners, and one thing that struck me after hundreds of interviews was that the only people who drove Rolls-Royces themselves were self-made, new money, wealthy people. The old money people all had Rolls-Royces, but they were driven around in them because that's one of the reasons that you get a Rolls is the incredible back seat. If the old money were driving themselves, then they would have luxury cars, but they very rarely drove Rolls. It may have been one of those social faux pas to wealthy old money to be in the same seat as their drivers or something like that, but I never actually asked about it. Well, the owner of my small company is incredibly wealthy but also rad as fuck, and he drives a tankin' property all the time just for the fuck of it. He also owns a very old, gorgeous estate from an extremely influential family, think Vanderbilts, and we throw parties there. But on top of it, he lets his employees rent it out for events. So my husband and I are throwing an anniversary party, never had a reception, in 2024. We have the entire estate and all 10 bedrooms for a whole weekend, and it isn't costing us a single dime. If I didn't work for the company, the cost of the venue would be upwards of $25,000 for the day. I never expected someone so incredibly wealthy to be so down to earth and generous. It's exactly who I would strive to be at that level of wealth. Wow, this is the first thing in this thread that made me say, that's so exciting. I hope you have a great day. About 25 years ago, a friend of my dad was turning 65 and treated 50 of his best friends to fly first class to London for 5 days, including tickets to Phantom of the Opera for all. One of his products was just picked up by Walmart for exclusive sale, and he wanted to spend a small bit of his good fortune. He managed time very differently than anyone I was used to. E.g., our meeting with him began precisely on schedule, lasted 30 minutes, and there was no chit-chat. Before this meeting we had opera meeting with his admin to discuss expectations. The admin explained that we had to be on time, no introductions, titles, just name, no small talk, no marketing, be prepared to answer technical and financial questions quickly and succinctly. For this latter, if there were numbers we had to know precisely which page of the material had the information. When the meeting took place we were brought in exactly, to the second, at the start time. Sat down, and within 30 seconds he was asking us all manner of questions. I had to field technical questions that appeared to be asked not so much for whether my answer was right, but that I didn't hesitate. I also gained a healthy respect for my manager as he was sharp and answered quickly and accurately. I had a CIO somewhat like that. He was incredibly smart with multiple PhDs. My interview was memorable. We had the usual back and forth, then he just stopped talking about 20 minutes into the interview and just stared at me. I later found out he wanted to know how I handled silence. Mind you, I was only 22 years old at the time. It was quite intimidating. I had my boss's boss do that to me in an interview, and he then broke with, "Well, what did you want to talk about?" I said, "I'm here for the job interview." "Yes, what did you want to talk about?" And so, I brought up stuff that apparently was good enough to get the job. I had an interview like that. This interview in general was kind of crazy to me as a new grad. First a panel, then each person interviewed me one by one, including an interview in the language I minored in. One guy came in, said, "Well, I have all the C questions I'm supposed to ask you. They even highlighted them for me. It's true they were, but I just want to have a conversation with you." And he just stopped talking. Threw him way off. Thankfully I recovered well enough that we had a pleasant conversation about why I chose the school I did, the major, minor, general life stuff. I got the job, though I ended up getting a better offer with a different company, but I'll never forget that interview. The answer to silence, ride that shit out, didn't say a thing. It's a power move and it works. Stare back, unblinking. Then silently raise your eyes higher and higher until you look at the ceiling. When they look up, tap their shirt once. When they look down, tap gently with a finger on their nose. I didn't realize that the act of driving is some peasant shit till I met them. I work for a major corporation. One of my colleagues started talking to a director as they were leaving once. They were both walking towards the train station and she assumed he was also getting a train. As they got there, a limo pulled up and nonchalantly said, "Bye," and left. I remember being at a well-known pet food company and the owner used to drive a POS station wagon. It had to be 15 years old. He sold at another well-known company and the new CEO pulled up with his car and driver, the difference between the founder and some guy hired by the board. A good friend of mine has a business that makes upwards of $50 million annually. He drives an old pickup truck to his multiple work sites. He also has a custom-built pickup worth north of $150,000, which is for weekends and holidays only. He has some very loyal and long-term staff. I made this mistake with an intern. Gave him detailed subway directions, proposed when and where to meet him at the station and escort them up to the office his first day. But he came in at the car drop-off, because he hires a riddy for every trip, because his family owns a huge company. My son's friend when in elementary school, dad was of the two founders of Capital One. Mom had a secretary for play dates. Dad would fly to London to watch Tottenham. Had a permanent seat. Their London house was next to J.K. Rowling's. You couldn't tell by the way they dressed or their cars. But their vacations were the big difference. The strange thing is that their son loved a mango juice sold maybe 10 to 15 minutes from their house. I always made sure we had some for mine. I send it to him via Amazon occasionally. That's the real answer. They have people who handle things. I dated a gal whose family was well off. Sold a company you've heard of for about $600 million. The whole family had a professional assistant, Janice. If someone needed something arranged, text Janice. 7-course catered dinner on Christmas Eve. Text Janice. Prep the semi-private jet for a flight cross-country. Janice will set it up. Need the oil changed in the Chrysler Town and Country minivan, seriously. Janice will have it done. Need access to the family's private ranch outside of Aspen. You'll work with the caretaker, and Janice will coordinate. I got to spend some time with her and she was paid very fairly for her work. Hire a private chef for a casual Tuesday lunch with her girlfriends. $2,000, just like that. That's what I would do if I were a rich AF. Private AF on call. Maybe prep some snacks for the week. Not just on call, they will be there and cook regularly. Or someone drops it off and it has reheat instructions. The cognitive load of shopping, planning, cooking then cleaning up, it must save them so much energy. Sometimes I cheat that system by just drinking a meal replacement shake. Take that, Bezos. That's the thing with the extremely wealthy. An overwhelming portion of the time and effort that ordinary people expend just maintaining their lives are taken care of by other people. It's very easy to find the time for social and leisure activity when someone else is taking care of all of the mundane shit for you. When you have a housekeeper and all you have to do is make sure they get their bill paid. When you have a personal chef and all you have to do is make sure they get their bill paid. Imagine how much that takes off your time and mental labor. Not me. I'd have the luxury of cooking, and I'd have one of those giant huge restaurant dishwashers where you just take everything into the corner and hit it with a pressurized hose full of incredibly hot water and put it inside a giant vibrating machine. If that doesn't work, and maybe a walk-in fridge and freezer, too, so everything is easier to see and find, because I always lose stuff in the back of the fridge and they're so damn hard to clean. I love to cook, but it's so annoying cleaning up and putting away the leftovers and dishes. I'd definitely hire a house cleaner, though. I splurged and got one when my business took off, even though I'm nowhere near as rich as a billionaire, because now I make what people make in big cities with high cost of living and live in a low cost of living area. It's just every other week, but I have depression, so when I get depressed, the toilet and floors get cleaned every 2 weeks, and everything gets wiped down. That's so good, dude. I feel like an asshole and I'm always worried she hates me, but it's still worth it. I just try and tip really well. I once had a rich mom friend from our shared preschool. She hosted a mom gathering for us and we arrived to find seated dinner with places, multiple courses, uniformed hired staff to serve, private chef, all that. It was over the top and kind of awkward. We just wanted to drink mimosas and laugh and unwind. But it ended up feeling stiff and formal. I think she was trying to impress us, but it was too much. One old money-rich person treated me to a fancy meal and she was super polite and nice and tipped well. What struck me was the decisiveness and confidence that everyone there would cater to her, and they did. She wanted X dish that they didn't make that day and they made it. The one that sticks with me was at the end she said, "I want a cappuccino with something, I want them to put a design on it. Like I've gotten cute cappuccinos in my life, it doesn't even cost extra." It never occurred to me to just ask for everything I want all the time. This was the same person that on a business trip hugged me after the flight. "I did it, woman thorned." Me, "Oh, was this your first time in economy?" And she goes, "No, flying commercial, just so we understand how rich." The expectation that someone else will always cater to you is spot on. I work at a really fancy hotel within walking distance of an Ivy League university, and the super wealthy people just expect certain things. Most people around them who aren't their friends or family is considered the help, even if they don't say it out loud. They also feel pretty entitled to things, like they will just walk up behind the bar and grab a bottle of wine that they want. For a rich person, anything illegal that results in a fine can be ignored. Lawyers and political donations are there for the rest. In SoCal there's been a little problem with water, so fines were instituted for overuse. $10,000 per month for really excessive use. Water management thought this would really put a stop to wasting water. Folks with enormous lawns at their 2 and/or 3rd home in Palm Springs considered $120,000 per year a gardening expense, and continued on as before. It wasn't even a blip in their radar. Things did improve a bit when the whole situation was named and shamed in the media, but I bet they're back to the lawn again by now. I don't think they even consider that it's illegal. They just don't see the value of an expensive bottle of wine the same way that the restaurant does. If someone purchases a $400 or $1,000 bottle of wine, that's great. But we need talk now. It happened so we can remove it from inventory. If they just grab it and expect to be charged for it, but the bartender was looking the other direction or talking to a guest and didn't see it happen, well, suddenly a bottle is missing and we don't know where it went. This sounds crazy, but it's a thing that happens. To these people, the item and cost is so minuscule that it doesn't even register, and they subconsciously think everyone else also has this mindset. This strikes me as old money when everyone else here is likely talking in new money terms. The difference is that old money is designed to last generations, not be spent inside of 30 years. There is a bit of differences culturally. Style theory did a whole thing on it a bit ago. I think the biggest difference is that new money feels the need to flaunt it more. New money would have the really expensive Gucci bag while old money would have an equally expensive Ralph Lauren handbag. The Gucci bag everyone knows is expensive since it's plastered in Gucci logos, while the Ralph Lauren you only know is expensive if you are so ultra rich or really into handbags. A friend of mine at school was old money, British aristocracy. They never deliberately showed their wealth. For the most part they were completely humble. For example, they only had one car and it was a tiny 30-year-old beater. They lived in an old farmhouse. It was nice, big, but not showy. I was only when you got to know the end you realized the vastness of their fortune. There were little things that wouldn't immediately strike you, but when you realized, then you knew they enjoyed things that most people wouldn't even dream of. An entire wheel of Parmesan cheese on top of the fridge. Their cellar had 1,000 bottles of wine in it, from the around vineyard in Italy. Every single piece of clothing they wore was personally tailored in Savile Row. The gold box in the living room. A solid gold cigar case, a personal gift from the Shah of Persia. If you asked, You'd discover that the land their farmhouse was on was about 1,000 acres, with tenant farmers on it. They had a pied-à-terre in London, a casale in Tuscany, an apartment in Paris, a townhouse in Oxford, and, it is only a little place, on the Peak in Hong Kong. And probably more places I didn't ever know about. But never, ever, did they brag. The only reason I found out about all this was because I got to know their son and the parents. Nobody else who knew him at school, a government school, had a clue, other than he had a posh accent. Sometimes you just have to ask. You won't always get what you want, but at least there's a chance. If you don't ask, there's zero chance. It actually amazes me how many people just don't think to ask. I grew up rich adjacent, not super wealthy, but around people who were. I learned really early in life that it's possible to get a lot of things you want just by asking nicely. I went to the theater with a coworker recently, and the seats we got were kind of crappy and right in front of a very loud, obnoxious group of drunk people. I said to my coworker that we should ask if we could move to better seats, and they told me not to even bother asking because no way. I asked the usher super nicely if there were any other seats, while also pointing out that it really sucked to have a special treat ruined by loud drunk people, so appealing to his sympathy instead of demanding anything, Onda checked with his supervisor and then moved us to great seats that were worth probably hundreds more than what we paid for. The key is to do it super politely and nicely and be gracious if they say no. If I had approached like a Karen and demanded to be moved, he'd have told me to fuck off. You need to have an air of just enough entitlement that you're used to getting what you want while also being polite, respectful and gracious.